Welcome to the IMCP Profiles in Partnership, the podcast that showcases how Microsoft partners and IMCP members boost their business by collaborating with other members and partners. I'm your co-host, Anthony Carano, and in each episode, I'll be talking to some of the most innovative and successful partners in the Microsoft ecosystem. The International Association of Microsoft Channel Partners, otherwise known as IAMCP, is a community of Microsoft partners who help each other grow and thrive. Members can find and connect with other partners locally and globally and access exclusive resources and opportunities. Whether you're looking for new customers, new markets, or new solutions, IMCP can help you achieve your goals. We'll hear their stories, learn from their experiences, and discover the best practices and strategies they use to increase customer loyalty and grow revenues. Whether you're a new partner or an established one, you'll find valuable insights and inspiration in this podcast. We hope you enjoy this podcast and find it useful and inspiring. If you do, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media and connect with us on our website, www.profilesinpartnership.com, where you can find more information, resources, and opportunities to partner for success. Thank you for listening, and now let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back to part 2 of our podcast series featuring an in-depth conversation with Ian Pavlik and Tim Mueller. In the previous episode, we explored the intricacies of selling a business and the meticulous preparations required to ensure a successful transition. Our guests shared invaluable insights on the strategies and challenges that many business owners face. In this episode, we continue our discussion, delving deeper into the dynamics of cultural and technological integrations post-sale, and the critical factors that contribute to a seamless transition. Ian provides a candid look at his personal journey from navigating the complexities of selling his business to establishing the Pavlik Foundation, which focuses on youth education and food security. Meanwhile, we also have Tim, who sheds light on the importance of readiness and strategic planning in the M&A landscape. This episode promises to be packed with practical advice and thought-provoking reflections for anyone considering the sale of their business or looking to understand the multifaceted world of mergers and acquisitions. So without further ado, let's dive back into our enlightening conversation. What would be your advice to, let's say you have, owner-operator right now, and let's say their identity is tied to the business. They're interacting with, at least their top customers that make, I'm just making up a number here, but let's say, that's 60, 70% of their revenue, but they're coming out at a point where like, you know what, I do want to look at, a future exit. What would be a few things that you would say, hey, you need to do right now, right, to start getting you on that path like you just described, like some instant action items?
One that I worked on and that I recommend was recommended to me. Go away for a day, turn off all your phone and computer midweek, and do not make yourself inaccessible for 24 hours, and then find out what broke. When you come back into the office, all hell broke loose and blah, blah, blah was a problem because you were inaccessible for 24 hours. Go fix those things. Then after whatever period of time, go away for 2 days and turn off being inaccessible, figure out what broke. Get to the point where you can be away for at least for an entire week inaccessible. To the point where, say, 2 or 3 weeks through a cycle of some point, get that. So think of it that way. Don't just try to go away for a 2-week vacation and turn off. Do it in segments, knowing that I know there was one point back in 2018, my wife and I went and climbed Kilimanjaro. And I knew I was going to be inaccessible for 10 days at the maximum. And so that was kind of a goal for me. And for about a year and a half before that, I worked through that schedule. So that's, I think, or can really reveal where you are integral to the operation of your business.
That's excellent advice. Now, you mentioned something, this process was 10 years in the making. I know earlier we were talking about just the conversations you were having, with your partners, and then doing, between that, getting it socialized internally, making yourself inaccessible, a focus on the reoccurring, revenue to increase the EBITDA multiple. So a lot of thought and detail, was into this process. I applaud you for that. Was there any thought given to like what were maybe the key criteria you were looking for in a potential buyer? Was there any conversations about that? If so, maybe share with us a little bit of what those conversations were and why.
So that was probably one of the biggest barriers to why I didn't dip my toe into understanding the M&A market earlier, because I felt like we were a Frankenstein. We were kind of like three businesses in one that had some overlap, but there was some clear distinction between the three different business units. And I thought, why would anybody want us? How I don't see anyone else there that fits like us. And it wasn't until I started talking to some M&A firms and then talking with Tim, and that was really what got us to work with Tim, was how much he held our hand and educated us. And his advice was, you don't know until you start talking. I don't know what the potential buyers might want. And sure, maybe it's a split. Maybe somebody might want this third and the other two might want the other two thirds or whatnot. So there was a lot of uncertainty. I put up my own barriers for why I thought people did not want to buy us, as opposed to thinking about us why they might want to buy. And as we went through the dating process with a number of potential buyers, it became clear. Some were like, don't need that part. I'm just interested in that element. Or there were some that were interested in the whole part or didn't understand how we were or just wanted to replace my seat and take over, versus like Tim talked, accreted value with merging in. So I was a bit of a barrier there because I didn't appreciate or understand what the options were. I wish I'd educated myself a little bit sooner, but that was really what I learned from Tim and his team.
Yeah, one thing I might add with that is that to better understand what the seller's long-term vision is, changes who we bring to them for conversations. So Ian clearly said, I think it's time for us to move on from the business. Not, the second we sell, but at some point in the near future, we'd like to move on. So at that point, that opens up for us to bring in what we call search funds, where there's someone who just wants to buy a business and run it, which we brought a couple of those guys to talk with them. It lets the strategics, a much bigger, Pavliks.com comes in like Syllogist and buys them. Or you have a private equity that may want to roll Pavliks.com into an existing portfolio company. Whereas a CEO that says, hey, I'm looking for a growth partner and I want to stay on and run the business and grow with them, that starts to narrow the field a little bit more so to the private equity firms that say, listen, we want the talent to stay in place for maybe ever, or at least for a long time, versus, let's say, a search fund that is an executive that wants to kind of parachute in and run the business. And so that made our job a lot easier once we started talking strategically with Ian and his family members. And I will throw a shout out to them, is that family businesses are not easy. But I saw such a collaboration with the Pavliks, in how they viewed the legacy of their business as a family business and the roles that each of them played and the trust that they had in each other, that the decision was made for the betterment of the good of everybody. And man, that was so refreshing for us to see, because you go in a little bit shy, not knowing the family dynamics because they could be toxic. But this was just a wonderful example of doing the right thing for the family. And now, as we'll talk a little bit more in this podcast about the foundation that Ian is running, they did well and now they're doing good. And that's a beautiful thing to see as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Now, I
you.
appreciate you sharing that, Tim. And before we move to like the next segment, I guess the question, Ian, is so as you went through this journey, you mentioned how you were setting up some of your there were roadblocks that you were setting up. How did you finally get to a place to settle up on, yeah, this is the right buyer for my business?
For us, we felt that keeping the business together as a whole would make our staff happy, would make our customers happiest. So when we found a buyer in Syllogist that was interested in the company as a whole, that made us comfortable. We saw a strong leadership team there, and that was important. In hindsight, I wish I had interviewed more of their leadership team. Not that there was anything wrong in the end, but I didn't do as much as maybe I should have as the seller. You think of it's the buyer who's asking most of the questions, and I did, and they were very open and transparent. But it was that was something that we felt very comfortable in handing the keys over to them. It was our plan and our criteria all along was none of the Pavliks, the owners, wanted to stay around for longer than 12 months, or whatever is needed to make sure there's a smooth and happy transition for our staff and for our customers. That was important for us, but we weren't interested in hanging around in some sort of ongoing management capacity. So when we saw there was a strong management team and everybody was aligned that way, and they had gone through some acquisitions before, so that was good. This wasn't their first rodeo, and they had a transition plan already in place. Those were signals for us that this worked, as well as the offer being very good.
That helps.
Yeah. So one of the things that I alluded to in the due diligence process is cultural and technology integration. Those are challenges that we all go through. I've gone through it in bringing in people, and there's different philosophies that people have. And I won't share my horror stories about what you do during that. But what do you think are the most successful factors for a business from both sides, from both the seller and the buyer side, for successful integration into the new business?
Rudy, that's an interesting question because, I'm sitting here in the business of M&A knowing that almost 60% of all deals are not deemed successful in the rearview mirror. 60%. And so, and 100% of those are really dealt to the fact that there wasn't enough due diligence in, let's say, the cultural aspect of integrating the teams. The great thing about our Microsoft sellers is that they care about the businesses. They've built it, and they've had sleepless nights, and they've really put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. So they want a soft landing for their employees. They want to be able to continue to service their customers so that their legacy stays strong. And they also obviously want to have, the economics of an exit be strong for them and their own family. But I really can't prepare our clients much for the cultural integration because they are who they are. And all I ask them is to be transparent about what they do and how they treat their employees. Don't change anything in the months or weeks leading into the deal because, our buyers are professionals and they can see whether or not you've now put on your best suit and tie metaphorically for the deal. So just run the business as though it's not going to be sold. Talked about your culture and your employees with total transparency. And then it really is up to the buyer to get in deeply and to compare the way that their ecosystems work and their culture. You've got to ask the tough questions that if the seller has an unlimited vacation policy, but the buyer has a very strict, you earn your vacation by your service hours and years, then those two might not match really well if you're now going to change it. And if you don't change it, the buying company says, how come they get unlimited vacation and we don't? Or, if the seller usually has a huge benefit awards gathering every year and they take their team to a city, destination, Vegas for a weekend or whatever it might be, but the buyer never does it. And now that's gone from the combined businesses. So those are probably more surface level things, but there are things that are idiosyncratic or the nuances of blending cultures together. Cross-border deals are hard because those inherently do have cultural differences in the way that employees work, even down to now hybrid work from home versus work in the office. So your question has got a lot of different tentacles to it, Rudy, and it's really important on the cultural side that the buyer be exhaustive in their ability to understand who they're buying. And I will tell you, most cases, the buyer doesn't even know what they bought until they're 6 or 8 months into it, both from a cultural and environment, but also even digging into the books and their customers. They really don't know what they've bought until well into the integration. And then I think on the technology side, there are a lot of buyers that say, we have not been as technologically forward as the seller is, and they may want to adopt the way that the seller uses technology, whether it's through their billing process or processes that they use within servicing their customers, or in Ian's case, building this beautiful platform that it was scalable. And so we again look at those buyers to do an exhaustive search on how well the technology can scale, and if in fact it is right for their current customer base to pick up and cross pollinate.
I really appreciate the way you describe that, Tim, because that is such a real challenge when you're purchasing a company and the culture is just has to change at some point. And like I said, I remember some members of some of my team saying, just go in and fire everybody and start all over again, which is that was never my approach. So, Ian, I've got a question for you because this leads into, since you've sold your company, how did you manage the transition of the business to Sylogist? I'm sure you had some challenges, and then with staff members and things like that. Again, the cultural, the business processes, all the challenges and surprises that can come up. Can you share a little bit about what you ran into?
Yeah, for sure. I'd be honest, I didn't think enough about the day after the deal closed leading up to it. I was focused on that. And then when it happened, I was like, oh yeah, so now I got to keep running this business, but in a different perspective, in a different way. And so that was hard. It was a lot of one-on-one conversations with staff, initially key staff, and then sort of spread out from there. Making sure everybody understood that it's business as usual, but is it really? It is, but everybody's a little bit anxious. Change is hard no matter what. And so my focus, my responsibility was around keeping everybody calm, being honest, because yes, there were some suddenly invoices went out differently and pay happened. And to your point about vacation was calculated differently, still the same way, but in a slightly different manner. And that causes a lot of confusion and angst. So it was just kind of trying to smooth things out. I was challenged with now suddenly not being the boss anymore, which was funny for me. So for a few months, I had still responsibility for the operations, but when we wanted to hire a headcount, I had to get approval, which was like, really? Huh? Okay. How do I go about doing that? So, that was a bit of a hurdle for me. And then very quickly, I became not responsible for the P&L. And that responsibility disseminated away from me into different departments, and numbers weren't my thing. Whereas I live by the numbers. I love to look at them and analyze them. I found that sort of an interesting, difficult change at first. And then it actually, after a little while, it became a bit of, I could breathe a little bit because sure, I had to make sure the revenue still happened, but, all up responsibility started to disseminate. That was a little bit difficult to handle. But then so I had a 12-month contract to stay on. And really the last 3 months, I was there just in case somebody had a question. So it was a little, I don't want to say awkward for me, because I felt like I needed to be of value. But I guess my value was the backstop for historical context and knowledge on customers, how we operated, what was going on. But it was an interesting time for me.
So you brought up that one word, customers. How did it impact your customers? Any surprises there?
I feel like we handled that very well. I can't think of any customer that bolted or got significantly upset. In some our bigger customers were kind of happy because we had grown from a 20, 30 to 40 to 50 person operation. And, while we're 50 is big, for some of our really big customers, we're quite small. So they felt a little bit more comfortable with, oh, now you're growing, when we're dealing with some of our really big. We had a lot of pro sport customers and some big government agencies and stuff. So I think in some ways it helped there. Our much smaller local customers felt concerned. Oh, you're moving head offices away. Are you changing? What's going on? But again, conversations with them to say, no, nothing is changing. And nothing did really change in that regard. A little bit of time, 2 or 3 or 4 months. And when they called, they still got a live person on the phone like they did before. Then sort of the customer's anxiety waned. So I think we focused on that because also my name was attached to the company and I knew the customers. A good number of local customers knew me personally in the business world around here, and I didn't want to just leave them high and dry. So there was a personal investment in it as well. So I think overall it was a work, it was a conscious effort, but it worked well in the end.
That's great to hear.
This has been great. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I can ask you guys probably about another dozen or 2 dozen questions. Don't worry, we've only got 3, and so. But this has been. This has been really rich. So really appreciate the conversation so far. So let me ask you this, Ian. I know as we're as you've gone through and shared your journey, about with selling, your business and, that process. Tell us a little bit about, what it was like and, to work with IT ExchangeNet on your transaction.
They were wonderful. When we were at the point where we thought, I want to find out, how do I sell my business? How do I go through? Who do I call? I had actually met with Tim face to face, I want to say 5 or 6 years earlier at a Microsoft conference. I think it might have been in Vegas. And I remember that we were sitting in a little sort of restaurant before it opened at a table. And I was just trying to fish. Like, I had no idea how much we were worth and what's going on. And Tim was frank and honest. He said, you're not there yet. Your revenue's too low. You're not mature enough yet. And in hindsight, he was absolutely right. So when the time came around 4 or 5 years later, I had seen the name around and I talked with a couple different firms. And then when I talked with Tim, he spent like almost an hour on the phone with me, explained the process, how this is the first time I was doing it. I know some people have gone through this, and Rudy, you've done it, rinse and repeat, and gone through. But for me, it was the first time, and maybe the only time that I'll do it. So it was important, and Tim really held my hand, and then introduced me to his team that was able to take me through the marketing process, and then I call it the speed dating round, I guess, with all the potential buyers, and then into the due diligence, and then the deal close. And that was very helpful. And then he also introduced me to a lawyer that he had done some other transactions with. And that was really helpful because now I had somebody that I knew Tim trusted. So therefore, by association, I should. And they were very helpful. They had done similar transactions before, and in the Microsoft space as well. So I wasn't explaining to sort of my traditional lawyers that I use in the rest of the business who we are, what we did, what was the Microsoft partner ecosystem like, how did recurring revenue, what was interesting to, like, all that stuff. The lawyer that Tim recommended, knew everything and came in and really helped us. So I know I'm giving Tim a lot of praise, but he deserves it. Him and his team were excellent and really, really made this process as easy as I think as it should be.
Ian, thank you for that. Let me just underscore the importance of that lawyer who understands those mid-market technology deals as part of the equation. Probably the single most important person once you get to the LOI stage is the transaction attorney, because he or she understands idiosyncratic language within purchase agreements and literally can save the seller millions of dollars of headaches down the road if they make sure they catch some of the gotchas that are in the purchase agreement, and then can horse trade a little bit in order to make it seller friendly. And we have a whole host of folks that we trust that are not overly expensive, because these are smaller mid-market deals. They're not $500 million deals. And but can't say enough about how important they are to the process.
Well, Tim, I've got one final question for you. I'm going to circle back to the beginning where you were talking about the Microsoft AI partner program now. And the whole evolution taking place in our industry. There's a lot of changes taking place, and not every partner is adapting quickly. Although I think people are learning more and more every single month, and we certainly are trying to help them through the IAMCP. So, what trends are you seeing, or happening in the marketplace now that are going to affect the Microsoft partner M&A space landscape in the next few years? We know technology is going to affect it. What other trends are you seeing? Because there's many facets to the IT industry. What do you see how each one is getting impacted?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that, the conversation that Ian and I had, and I think it was at Inspire in Vegas, 5 years before you went to market, is something that I have with a lot of people, because I will tell you plainly, there are a lot of people in my shoes that all they want to do is get the company to market. And we have found that if you rush it to market, nobody's satisfied 6, 7, 8 months later, and everybody has just wasted their time, as opposed to playing more the long ball, where you say, you know what, here's a roadmap of things you need to do. Let's talk once a year or whatever it might be. And 3, 4 years down the road, might be mature. There are things that companies are not necessarily embracing quickly enough right now, which will diminish their value if they don't get on board. So some of that may be in their hiring practices, where, you know, 6, 7 years ago, place mattered as far as where employees were. And so if you were based in Boston, you had a very rich, group of people coming out of the universities to recruit, to physically come in your office and work in Boston. And some of the other major markets, Austin, Texas has a wonderful piece. So does Columbus, Ohio, with Ohio State. But other cities where companies were based were maybe a little bit at a disadvantage with their employees. Now the world is open, and with remote working, you have the ability to attract the best talent. And so buyers are saying, you know what? Why aren't you doing that? Why are you keeping your universe so small and only bringing people in that necessarily might be in a 30-mile radius of your business? That's one. Number two, I think this might be number 2, 3, 4, is your adaptation to technology, and where you stand in your philosophy on this one. We still have, Great Plains type of integrators, right? That, have not evolved quickly enough because they had follow-on work and they felt they can keep moving, and not being too intimidated, or being intimidated by the Microsoft Dynamics suite and everything that has to offer there. So it's that inability to evolve with the Microsoft, offerings that are out there. But by the same token, if you're 5 miles wide and an inch thick in your offerings, that doesn't help you either, because you're now competing against some of the large players that have a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas within Dynamics. So I think you need to choose your lane and be the best at it. And if you find that you're not being competitive in the market with only offering, let's say, Teams or Azure, and you're losing a lot of deals with people that say, listen, I want kind of one hand to shake, one throat to choke, and I'd rather have a much bigger firm, then the writing's on the wall that it may be time to start looking to sell your business. And I will give one more note to the sellers, is that, what Ian did really well was he wasn't timing the market. He was making sure that they were at the right place and they were in the right mindset to sell. Because if all you do is time the market, then usually bad results happen. And markets can swing pretty quickly depending on geopolitical issues. The market, we're seeing, the Fed likely going to bring interest rates down, but if people didn't time that 5 months ago when they went to market. So it's a matter of making sure that your company is ready from all there. And so I'll put a quick plug in that we do have something called Ready, Set, Go, and it's a free readiness assessment for those contemplating a sale, but just don't know if they have the readiness. And we'll grade you on financial preparedness, on your operations, your vision, your marketing, and make sure that what you bring to market is something that is very embraced by the buyers.
That's a great answer. It's a great answer. Really appreciate it, Tim.
Yeah, that was great. And Tim, I was just going to ask you: is there a, URL somebody can go to access that Ready Set Go?
Yeah, it's on our homepage,
It
which we
is okay.
can put in perhaps the podcast, but it's itexchangenet.com, and we'll get back to you the same day, obviously, and schedule a time to do this kind of cursory, readiness program.
Okay, yeah, and we'll definitely have that in the show notes for sure. All right, well, Ian, so we've talked, you shared, just about how you grew your business, you navigated the process of selling it, briefly touched on a little bit about Mount Kilimanjaro, hiking that. We'll maybe have to revisit that in a follow up, maybe. Well, tell us though, what are you doing today?
Well, I find I'm almost as busy as I was when I was running the business. But the great thing is I'm doing the things that I'm passionate about. So, as Tim alluded to, and I love that saying, when you do well, you do good. And my wife and I were passionate about a couple core things. It focused around youth, and that was education and food security. So we very quickly we started the Pavlik Foundation, a charity, and we are focused on providing educational opportunities to youth and helping the youth with food security. And a program that we actually just launched this fall, and we're piloting it in a couple schools, is called Kids Pantry. So we identified that a lot of the schools in our community get food during the day, like there's breakfast programs or snack programs. Families can access a food bank type of service, but usually food banks only provide about a quarter or a third of a food need for a month. And so what we're doing now is we're actually identifying kids in a school that are food insecure and providing backpacks of food for them that we drop off on a Friday. So the kids come down to the front office, pick it up, take it home, and now that child has food, healthy food for the weekend, so they can nourish their body so that when they come to school, they're ready to learn and hopefully thrive in school. And, it's a child can't be successful in their life if they don't feel good about themselves and they're physically healthy and can learn. And we're not focused so much on trying to give things like scholarships to the best, brightest, smartest. Our hope is to take those kids that are maybe have challenges that aren't their fault, that is because they're a matter of circumstances, and give them the opportunity to hopefully get a step ahead and break that cycle of poverty and give them a chance at success in life. So that's what's keeping us busy these days. We're pretty excited about it.
That's awesome. And where can people go to find out more about this foundation?
PavlikFoundation.com. That's our website, and you can contact us on there and learn more about our Kids Pantry program as well.
And people, they can donate, I assume.
Absolutely. So there's a donation form on our website as well. And what's neat is we now have the ability for people to support a child. So if you can support a child, it costs about $20 to $25 a weekend to provide healthy, full meals the entire weekend for the kid. And that's something that we just launched about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing. And we'll also have that website in the show notes as well. Well, gentlemen, once again, thank you. This has been fantastic. This just the information that you guys shared and the time that you gave has just been so rich and rewarding. So definitely want to thank both of you. We will have both websites in the show notes. So aside from the websites, is there another place where listeners can go to connect with you?
Well, we have a Vimeo channel as well that has a lot of videos of kind of how-tos and 2-minute takes for prospective sellers. And then we have a lot of information that we post in the form of articles on LinkedIn. So Anthony, if we can give you those as well, that would be wonderful.
Excellent.
And I have an open offer for anybody who wants a cup of coffee, because I always have a pod on here. If you're driving through Barrie, Ontario, Canada, stop by my place and you can have a coffee with me. I'd love to sit on the front deck and chat.
On my way, Ian.
Well, once again, thank you so much. And gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Anthony and Rudy.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Rudy.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Wow, that was a great episode. I feel like I just sat through a masterclass on M&A, for Microsoft partners and in the tech ecosystem. I learned so much, and I really appreciate, once again, Tim and Ian for spending that time with us. I know I took away a lot of, main points. Rudy, how about yourself?
Well, you're absolutely right. That was a very informative. It was a masterclass on mergers and acquisitions. And one of the things that I really appreciated was one of the things that Tim talked about was the process that he likes to take sellers through to really prepare their companies and for all the items that they're going to have to deal with in selling their company, to make sure that the company is mature enough to be sold, that their systems and all their accounting information is ready to present. Because I know that's one of the things I went through when I sold my first company, was the tremendous amount of work that's required when you're selling. And do you have a good reason? And are you mature enough to sell to really maximize the proceeds that you're going to get from the sale? And both Tim and Ian shared quite a bit of information on how much effort that's going to take. And sometimes it just takes time to be ready. And I would caution anybody selling their company, go through the process and be ready to sell, because that's going to be very, very important to you, whether you stay with the successor organization or not.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, just to piggyback on that, when you're talking about this from at the company level, and just how as I recall, like Ian shared about for them, this process, personally, as the main principal was, I think he said something like 10 years in the making, for him and other members of the family. And specifically when he just talked about just the importance that he, as the main principal, become less significant by design, so that the buyer, then it's not contingent upon him staying put in the company for it to be successful. And so that really resonated with me.
And another thing that comes up, and having gone through having sold a company, is things you're not always prepared for, especially when you're staying behind to do the transition, or if you accept a new role in the company to maximize your earnout. So and those things that you're going to deal with are both cultural and technological changes in the post-sale process, because one, while you may have been the most important person in your company in building and selling that organization, now you're part of a different organization. So the culture can change on you. And how is that going to impact the employees that stay behind, as well as the technology changes that also come to play? Because when you sell your company, is that company identical to yours, or are you a key cog in their path forward in selling that company? And so that's part of the process that you as a seller go through as you help integrate your organization into the new organization and help them assimilate the new culture and the new technology, because that's real important to make your employees feel comfortable in that change, because they are an integral part in the success of the new company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, on that note, just hearing you talk, it reminded me of one of the lines that Tim shared. And I love this quote. I'm going to use this quote because it can apply, even outside of just M&A. But when he said, expectations not articulated is disappointment guaranteed. And I just, whether I'm in, communication with, vendors, partners, whoever, just the importance of setting, the right expectations. And, in this particular context, just the expectations, especially around as you're coming around, just going through like the due diligence. And folks listening will have to, go back through, the podcast and hear it. But as he touched on some of the key areas of that, doing that due diligence to set the proper expectation just around, number one, risk, reoccurring revenue, strong margins on revenue, but then also like, does your technology, scale? And, as he touched on, those were like the kind of like the four main ones, but I just found that to be fascinating, and just the importance of keeping that that in mind, set the right expectations. You're doing the due diligence, but the big thing too is as our listeners have been listening in on this particular episode about, hey, I'm interested in selling my business. The point about, look, you're building your business, keep the long term in mind. Don't just do the things to take the shortcuts to try and spike the numbers to try and get a sale, but do it right, and good things will kind of happen. I think that's probably one of the best things somebody can do in setting that right expectation as they look to eventually want to do an exit.
Yeah. So, we had some great advice from both of our presenters today. That was really a wonderful episode. So, in closing, I want to thank everyone who's listened to this podcast for joining us on this episode of IMCP Profiles in Partnership, powered by Dunamis Marketing. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we know you will find it useful and inspiring. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media and connect with us on our website, www.iamcp.org, where you can find more information, resources, and opportunities to partner for success. One of the best ways to partner for success is to join IAMCP, a community of Microsoft partners who help each other grow and thrive. IAMCP members can find and connect with other partners locally and globally and access exclusive resources and opportunities. Whether you're looking for new customers, new markets, or new solutions, IAMCP can help you achieve your goals. To learn more, visit the IMCP website, iamcp.org.